Wow, it's the last technical track of the day. I can't believe it's gone so fast. Every speaker has been absolutely amazing, and our last one won't deviate from that. He is the technical lead at comwrap, 2 times Magento master, and a huge community maintainer who I've had numerous conversations with over the years on architecture and everything you can imagine about Magento. I want everyone to give a huge Meet Magento UK welcome to our final speaker of the day, Alex, on Asynchronous Magento.
Thank you very much for introduction. Hello, everybody. I'll talk today a little bit about the Asynchronous Magento, like it's written in my title. Shortly first about myself. My name is Alex. I'm technical team lead, as John said, at comwrap, doing the community maintaining and DevDocs maintaining on my, I would not say spare time, but it's more like a hobby, and we also do it to the company. And yeah, in the last 2 years as Magento master, and basically that's one of the reasons why I'm here, because those last 2 years I'm mostly working with Magento architecture team in topics related to asynchronous Magento, the APIs, the communication, the workflows, with the new possible projects and so on. And yeah, today we will talk about the Magento evolution and asynchronous Magento. So firstly, let's just jump on the evolution of the Magento itself. So basically from day to day, last 12 years, Magento is in the market, the merchants requirements are growing. And that's become more complex, not only for the merchants to hold their businesses, but also for the developers and integrators like us to integrate their requirements and their solutions. And you can imagine that the new technologies appeared in the last 10 years, like huge amount of technologies. The merchants has their own set of technologies which they're already using in their systems, in their businesses. And when they now, after all those time when e-commerce is growing up, they come into Magento world, they want to integrate Magento together with their own systems or some third-party systems which they're already using. And that's basically is producing the issues, not only for them, but also for integrators. I mean, if you're talking about the small businesses, they're mostly everything going quite calm. Magento has a good API set for integrating with different systems. But if you're talking about the complex businesses for big merchants, the Magento in their ecosystem is mostly the small part of the architecture. And the small part have to work smoothly for their business needs, for growing their business, for push their business and sales forward. And all those requirements are becoming more complex and complex. And at the same time, the Magento also becoming more complex and complex. And Magento growing itself, it's new features adding from version to version into the core. They currently accounted 365 core modules in Magento, including commerce and B2B. That's basically one module per one day of the year. And the amount of those modules is only growing. I mean, if you have a look even on MSI, on inventory model, it just was last release added the 20, 30 new modules inside. And you can imagine that to support and to maintain such a big system, it's required a lot of time and resources. And not only from developers who's integrating them for the merchants while integrating in their business processes to connect to the other systems, but also for Magento team itself, who has those release cycles and have to fit in them. And this means if they add in a new functionality, they have to take care that all functionality works correctly. The old functionality have to be corrected, adapted, and work smoothly for updates. And basically, updates have to be as painless as possible. And if you have a look on this, like growing requirements at the same time, the expectation of the end customers also growing, but in another direction. So basically, the complexity of the systems are growing, but the expectation of the customer is that everything works much faster than it is. So we add in new modules, we add in new technologies, but the final result have to be better and faster. And if you work with the Magento quite a lot of time, you know that performance is very often become I would not say a problem, but an issue, and we have to deal with it. So basically, that's why I decided to talk today a little bit about this and how we can improve it, how we can make our life better, and how we can make the Magento work better. So first of all, asynchronous operations. That's operation process without time connection to events. So basically, when you run some operation, it has to be executed without time connected to the event which you run it on. So let's say you push some message, and then you basically should not be care about the direct answer from this message, but you can gather the answer a little bit later. And that's have to be developed in a level of the complexity of, let's say, Magento, that all modules and all system works correctly with this behavior, which is a little bit challenging. And let's just have a look on a short example, just to give you a bit more insights. Why do we really need it? That's a typical checkout flow, which I see I see it super often. I see it for a lot of customers who already existed Magento 2 stores or Magento 1, even that's honestly not even connected to Magento itself. So that's a checkout flow. When the customer pushes the buy button, so he's on the checkout, he had his product and he want to buy them, he pushes the buy button, and then this buy button triggers a set of actions which executed synchronously, usually. They happen in one by one. So we first reduce stock of the product or doing the reservation for the stock. We process in the online payment. We created an invoice for this online payment. We send the email. We send a confirmation email, and we send an invoice email for the customer. We created a shipment. If the shipment processes are automated, we generate in the shipping label. We send in the label to the customer. We updating the tracking information for the order, and then we also may export order to external system if you're talking about the big merchants who has their own systems, and you can add any other steps you want here. We can export the customers to, if he just registered to some another system, or again, if you're registering during the checkout, we have to register the customer and so on. So the process becomes super complex, super big, and this means also the response time for the end customer is just growing, and the satisfaction is going down. And I met a lot of cases when customer clicked the button and then it took him, I would not say several seconds, that's even the best case, up to minutes till he sees the success page because of poorly developed the checkout process. And then he basically will never come back, or he even can he can just close his browser window, and he never will know that he finally placed an order. And then he start to get an email saying, hey, I didn't place it, I canceled it, was so slow, I thought it stuck, and so on. So yeah, that's a processes which I see super often. What basically we can do with it? We can just leave the same processes there, but we can simplify the workload. So user click the place order button, we trigger a set of action, and we deliver him success page. That's all. That can be done within a milliseconds. When we just send in a message, hey, this guy placed an order, please do everything for him. And then we deliver success message to the customer, and he don't know what is going on in the background. And we also not relate to any services. By the way, I forgot to say that also in this big chain workflow, in this one, if any of those services fall down, then the checkout processes fall down. And that's all. We're losing the customer, we're losing the conversion. So basically, that's similar to what is Amazon doing, for example. So the processing all processor on the background. So on the background, we can basically create an invoices, send an emails, even make an online payments. That's honestly requires some more work for developers, but that's basically what increasing the conversion rates and what is making the user experience much, much better. And if I'm talking about the work for the developers, yes, true, we have to still manage, let's say if online payment is failed, we have to put order on hold, send an email to the customer and ask him, hey, please update your credit card information, or process payment one more time. But yeah, we here, I mean, as integrators and developers, we here not only to make our work easier and to do less work, but also to fulfill the merchant's need and fulfill the customer need. So let's be more serious and go to a bit more complex world. It's basically the Magento architecture, or how to stay calm in managing all those 365 Magento modules. Magento is a set of modules. That's a statement, and it's true. And if you have a look on how the modules are work together, you will see something like this. And with this picture, you can understand that you don't understand anything, because all those modules are communicate with each other chaotically. They have a lot of dependencies to each other, and you cannot just kick out some modules out of there. I mean, you can some of them, but the current monolithic application state is like this, that all modules are super coupled together. And if the Magento is growing and will proceed to produce the modules which are coupled together, you will have even more problems to maintain them. So one day the Magento architecture team decided that they're going in a wrong direction and they have to improve these processes. And they not develop yet, but plan the desired state of the Magento architecture, where we see that all layers are separated, the modules are separated. So we have, let's say, catalog, checkout, order, like a services, and those services can work independently. We have, let's say, API levels. We have a front API, which is GraphQL. We have a backend API, which is REST API. We have, let's say, store inventory, which is currently follow this desired state approach, which can work independently. And the main goal of this one is that technically you can replace any of those modules. You can delete them if you don't need them. Let's say if you don't need a customer module, if you manage the customer in your CRM, there have to be a way to easily do it and not leave the whole bunch of customer-related functionality inside of Magento. That's what is currently impossible to do, and that's what Magento want to achieve in next releases, not 2.4, unfortunately, but I hope it will come. I mean, you cannot just easily do it because you have to stay backward compatible with all existing implementation, merchants, third-party extensions, and so on. So basically, that's requirements which are already defined in service isolation approach. I didn't tell that, but service isolation approach, that's what I showed you before, and all services are isolated and independent from each other. So the all operations between those services have to be or must to be idempotent. So idempotent. So basically, each operation you executed have to have one state, and if you execute it 2 times, it should not do the same operation 2 times. So the state should not change. All service contracts should expose a synchronous API, so it's not possible always to have everything run asynchronously, but it have to be the goal, and it have to be used in the places where it's possible and as much as it's possible. And all state modifying operations should expose bulk APIs, so we have to reduce amount of calls definitely. If you imagine the big system with a lot of services which communicate to each other via the API or via the service contracts, we want to reduce amount of calls as much as possible. To achieve that, you basically already can start to do it. That's up to you. You don't need to wait till Magento will do this. You can do when you develop a new extension, when you integrate in the requirements of your customers into Magento, you already can work by following those approaches. There are 3 aspects which I also want to go through. That's event-driven architecture, it's common query responsibility segregation, and event sourcing. Yeah, it's long, it can change words, but let's go just a little bit deeper. We have event-driven architecture. That's architecture which is controlled by events, which is technical requirements in Magento 2018. So basically, it's basically mean that each event can be extended. You can plug in each event and add your own logic there. You can easily remove any module and replace it with your own events inside. So that's more like modularity of the whole Magento. And honestly, working last months with our customers and developing a new project, we try to follow this approach, and it's quite good, and it's quite easy then to replace those basically Magento modules with your own modules and proceed to work with the whole Magento architecture. Then we have common query responsibility segregation. That's a way when we separate in the database writes and reads when we use the API. It's unfortunately not implemented in Magento almost. I'm always giving an example, the Magento MSI, the multi-store inventory module, which follow those approach. So basically, when you write something into database, you're doing only write, you're not reading what you get in then. Sorry, awake. So technically, let's say currently, if we will imagine the post products API call in Magento. When you post the product data, it's saving the product, but then also it's reading all the product information back from the database and deliver you back as a response. That's not following CQRS approach. So basically, when you write something, you have to only write, but then if you need an info, you get in an info. It's making also communication much faster, and you have a strict separation between reads and writes. And then the event source in itself, there should not be limitation on number of events that can apply to our objects. So we have an object. Yeah, I moved too forward. So basically event sourcing first. To reach object, we log in and we save in information about each event which is happening with some objects. So if you're talking about the inventory, for example, we have a product, the product has a stock, and each changes of the stock we are logging. What is it giving to us? It's giving us the possibility to plan, to facilitate the planning and development, to control the whole system processes, to see the all information, to see all data, which is all operations which are happen to the object itself, and to track all changes of the states. That's not implemented in Magento, unfortunately. I mean, I wrote this implemented partially. That's true. On some places, it's done, but currently, it's very hard to do it on Magento level. Again, if you're doing your own implementations, try to follow this. But that's all depends on the business needs. And if we will have a look on current Magento existed implementations, it's hard to reach this. The reason here also that Magento is not always the only point of truth for the data, let's say for the products, customers, stock especially. So if you have a look on the MSI module, it's developed in a way that technically you may not manage the stock on Magento. You can integrate some third-party ERP system which communicate to Magento and deliver the whole stock from this system. And this means it's super hard to manage the, let's say, inventory, by the reason that there are too many points where inventory might change. It may change in the ERP system. It may also change in Magento backend if you will support this one and go there and change it manually. This technically means it's not always possible to implement this in Magento. And yeah, and what basically Magento has already out of box to do it, I'll call it short of asynchronous data transfer principles or data transfer management. That's Magento message queue framework, which is available since 2.1 in Commerce Edition, and it was used only for one single case for 2 Magento versions. So a lot of kudos for the person or for the team who developed this to use it only for one single case in commerce. That's true. That's really thanks to them, and also thanks to Magento team that they decided to move it to open source, and it was moved in 2.3 version, 2.30. I helped a little bit on those works that were done, and it's finally become the open source. And currently, the message queue supporting the database queues, the RabbitMQ queue, like a most popular queuing system at this moment, or that moment when it was moved. And I leave here also like surprise or question mark, I would say, that it's technically also possible to implement with other queuing system if you want to, not currently supporting. But yeah, if you like something else, you can go to this one, and I will jump on this a little bit more deeper and a little bit later today. So what is basically, and one more. Close 2.4, and with my experience and with talking to different developers and team, I mentioned that a lot of developers still do not know about this one. I don't know if they don't know or they don't want and don't like to use the Magento message queuing framework. And I see also a lot of third-party extensions which develop some own queuing systems, which you have to deal with. But yeah, so that's basically my goal today, a little bit to share this information, to tell that there is an option to make it better. And please use this option. It's already there, and it's for you. So technically, Magento message queue framework, super simple has a super simple workflow. We have a publisher who publishing the messages to the queue, and then we have a consumer who taking messages from the queue. Sounds quite simple. You can use it widely in Magento Core. You can configure it as you want to. I don't want to go too deep in details here because I guess I made some long time ago the presentation about this, and it will take you additional 30-40 minutes to explain how it works, but you can easily find this info on the dev docs. Yeah. So yeah, some formatting issues. So amount of consumers that was in Magento 2.2x, there was 2 of them. So basically there are only 2 workers, or let's call it not consumers, but 2 usages of Magento message queue framework in a core functionality. And since it's become open source, you can see that there was just jump to the 15 in one major version. This means that Magento core team, open source team, also people who contribute to Magento, trying to use it more efficiently. Honestly, I can tell you that I guess half of this one was used only for Magento MSI. And on Magento 2.4, I cannot tell exact number. Currently, it's coming to more than 20 because it's not fully done yet and not published. Not everything published that will be in 2.4. But yeah, the usage of the message queue framework is definitely growing. And currently it's used in almost each area, or like big area of the Magento. We have it in catalog. So it's the first and only case is a B2B and shared catalog assignment that was first initial usage of message queue framework. Then we have products updates, product to website assignments, image resizes, and then sales rule code generators. That's all executed asynchronously currently in Magento. Then we have inventory, as I told you, quite a lot of and only inventory modules, which mean basically that inventory, as it's quite a big part of Magento. And I know there was also a lot of complaints about the performance there. So they're trying to go in the direction to execute operations synchronously where it's possible. And we released also several new, I would say, consumers and queues into the 2.4. And my favorite layer is basically the API layer. And even more deeper, it's a synchronous or bulk API layer, which is the biggest user of the Magento message queue framework. So why basically we have to use the asynchronous API? That was the desired state of the service isolation vision. That was requirements to use the bulk API, to use the asynchronous API as much as it's possible. We made some performance features or some measurement in our team. And yeah, we can tell you it's just faster. If you want to have faster system, if you integrate it with the other systems, another ERP system for any object synchronizations via the API, the synchronous and bulk API is just faster. In this slide, basically, you can see that this green line is our bulk API execution. Here it's showing, let's say, I just will give short explanation. With those tests, we try to import the products. There are 2 kinds of tests we can do. First of all, when we using the bulk API for import the products, first Magento only accept the request. It's not doing anything, just accept them. And then we have a consumer which is running in the background, which taking those requests from the queue and executing them. So here in the first measurement, we counted how much time Magento needs to accept the message. So that's basically when you push the button, let's say execute for me this API request with those 1,000 products there. Then you can see that if you're using the bulk API, so don't be confused, that's not a flat line. It's a little bit going up, but just a little bit. And the reason is here basically that bulk API is accepting all objects with one request, so you can pack them all together in one message. This means Magento don't need to initialize itself for each product, basically, sorry, not for each product creation, but for each accepting the message. If you're talking about the Asynchronous API or Synchronous API, every time you send in single requests with single products, the whole Magento have to be initialized to accept this request and then shut down. If you're talking about the bulk requests, Magento initialize only one time, accept all those 1,000 products, and only then shut down. This means we're saving a huge amount of time for loading unnecessary like class models, dependency, and so on. And then if you're talking, I mean, if you're still not sure that, yeah, but it's only accepting the messages, it's not the product like saving operation, so we will not get our products faster in the system. No, you will. You still will do it basically by the same reason, because consumers which are executing your messages, which is taking messages from your queue, they're loaded on a memory, so they're running on your server, they're already in a memory, and they're just picking up the messages and processing the products import. And we also made another test, which was importing 1,000 of products into the Magento by using different methods. And you can see that the bulk API is still about 70% faster, even on step when we're saving the product into the database. And that's also happening by the saving time on request, but also by the saving time of the already running consumer in a memory. Let's go next. And one small note: if you're talking about the small batches, when we import, let's say take 1 or 2 products, then there's no big performance improvement in this. So the bulk API and even a sync API is worth to use it on a big data transfer. But if you're talking about the single operations where we always has one object, one operation, it's not super heavy. I mean, it all depends on the user case. Be careful here. Then the time for execution is approximately the same. Even sometimes in this example, the bulk can be a little bit slower on a step, let's say when we create in the products, because the most bulk advantage is the loaded in memory consumer and one request for multiple objects. Yeah, as I told you about different cases. So for example, if you create the simple product with no images, simple attributes, the bulk maybe will be not the best if you're talking about only like 20, 30 product per request. But if you're talking about the standard products, which has multiple images inside, maybe some video links, set of the attributes, some stock update, prices inside, then definitely the bulk is better, because you will have much more performance here. So you will get products much faster in the system. They will go to the queue and then will be picked up from there. But again, as I told you, Magento is not loaded on those states. Let's go next. So what do we have basically as conclusion of those performance testing? Synchronous methods are always slow. That's still true. Yeah, it can be just a little bit slower if you're talking about the small batches, but it is slow. Elapsed time for synchronous API is a bit less for sync, but if you're talking about the bulk, the difference is huge. So asynchronous and synchronous APIs has a not big performance impact, but yeah, I mean, use bulk. That will solve all your problems. Yeah, as one of the also point as a benefit, you can run the multiple consumers for the same operation, which is technically mean that the multiple workers can work together and to proceed the request faster. Here, be careful because depends on the complexity of request. Multiple consumers may lead to the logs, to the deadlocks or wait logs on the database, because they will read the same table and the same data in a database. So let's just make a small practical example. So how to make all this stuff running? I mean, even if you have, I showed you the usage of the Asynchronous API, or I showed you the usage where the Magento message queue framework is running. But currently with, let's say, currently more than 20 cases where it's used, you may lead the problem that you install clean Magento, awesome, but half of the features are not running at all. Why? Because you need to run the consumers, basically. So first of all, there's such nice command qconsumers list. You can see the list of the consumers available currently in Magento. That's Magento 2.3 still. Quite easy to get. Then you can run the particular consumer if you want to. You can run it just from console and it will go to memory. But if you want to stay in a memory and have your console free to be able to close the window, something like this, you have to add this end in the end of the operation. Then it will be run on a background process. Then we have to, I mean, if you don't want to do it through the console, I understand that this is basically not a standard way because you still depend on the manual work. If you want to have everything automatically up and running, you can add the configuration in your environment PHP file, and then you have to define which consumers you want to run. That will also give you a flexibility, as I told you about the service isolation and to reduce amount of not necessary processes. It will give you a possibility to run only consumers you need, which will again reduce amount of loaded memory. And yeah, you run and use only the stuff which you basically need. And in this way, you can also configure the if the cron running in general, how many messages this consumer can accept till it's kill itself, yeah, and which consumer that's already told you about. Looking on time, I guess I have to speed up a little bit. There are some problems which you may have if you run the consumers. Is that if you have a deployment not in a Docker containers build, then for example, if you have a deployments where you have with deployer, for example, where you have a different folders for each new version, how they usually work in the switching the symlinks to the folders, and then you get a new Magento version after the deployment is done. What's happened then, if there is so the consumers are loaded in memory, and if you're not flushing your memory, so you're not, let's say, up new Docker image, this means they stay in a memory and they still look in the old folders, and there's no easy way to kill them. I mean, you can kill it manually, but you don't want this one. You have to have an automated process, and here is the problem coming out. So Magento has not automatically, out of box, the functionality which is called poison pill, which allow you to kill the consumers, and it's located in database, this value, and is basically when the messages come into the queue, it's seeing, oh, okay, version was changed and the consumer killed himself. But again, issue here that this happen only when you're using the poison pill and when the message is coming. This means if there are no messages are currently coming to the consumer, it will stay online till this messages come. So that will be quite long, can be quite long time. And if they're not widely used and you're doing the deployment, often your memory can just boost. Or not boost, just blow up. So last but not least, let's have a look a little bit into the future. What is Magento going in the direction, or want to do in the direction of the Asynchronous API and Asynchronous operations execution? First of all, there's consumer improvement, which solved the problem I just explained it before. It's already pull request, which is in review, and we hope it will be very soon part of the core. So that's a parameter for the consumer, which you can control the execution process, which you can define the sleep, which you can define that consumer have to be run only when new messages are coming. and you can define only how long the consumer stay alive in a time, then it's kill itself automatically. Then that's basically the performance improvement, which will speed up the process of the synchronous operation even much more. It's to using the Redis for the status storing and not the database, which is currently happening. And yeah, we already made some performance mixture tests, and it's given like 30-40% improvements on this one. So this is already in progress, but it's required to change some architecture inside of the MFQF module. Also not architecture, but implementation to make this possible. There are also cron improvements, thanks to John, who spent time last year, and we groomed together this on architectural meetings and get approval from Magento team also how it's have to look like. So the cron, which can be and have to be run asynchronously in Magento, there is a document, you can just read it through. And if you want to participate and if you want to implement it, then feel free to contact. Just use the Slack, contact me. You can also contact John, and yeah, I mean, we will be happy to have you on board. And basically the service isolation, the biggest project with Magento is currently doing. There is huge amount of documents about this one on Magento. You see how the big QR code is. So they wrote a lot of text there. I'm joking, that's just a long link. But yeah, Liz, use the also link to join, have know more about this project, and join if you want to. There is Up Design channel on Magento communities like engineering. And yes, last one, finally, that's what I told you before, that currently Magento supporting only databases and RabbitMQ, but there are a possibility to support other queuing system. There was a research made by Tarek from Magento architecture team, which looks super promising, and it's showing which technologies we can use already with existing Magento interfaces. And yeah, so the most popular here is basically Kafka, which I'm also looking at because it's the best which we can implement currently like a next step. But yeah, again, will repeat myself. Ping means like if you want to contribute, join, know more about these projects and implementations, and I will try to give you as much info as possible. Thank you very much. Hope I squeezed all info I had in those 30 with something minutes. I have more, but yeah, currently I have no more time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Alex. Really appreciate it. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for questions. If everyone would like to head over to the main stage for the closing keynote, I'm sure if you reach out to Alex on Twitter, on the community engineering Slack, or myself, who wants to talk about the cron background processing, like the community is always happy to talk when it comes to architecture and pushing Magento forwards. But amazing talk, really thank you. And thank you all for joining the technical track. And I hope to see you soon.
Yep, thank you very much. Bye-bye.